Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation dispels fuel scarcity rumor. President Buhari gives Nigeria's minting company sole rights to produce e-passports. On the international scene, American singer R. Kelly arrested in Chicago on alleged child pornography, obstruction of justice charges. And in sports, Eaglets to face Hungary, Ecuador, Australia in Group B of Under-17 World Cup.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has advised motorists and other petroleum product consumers to disregard reports about increase in petrol pump price. The corporation's group managing director, Malam Mele Kyari, says he told Senate President Ahmed Lawan on Thursday the price of petrol was abysmally low in Nigeria compared to what obtained in neighboring West African countries. Kyari says his visit to the National Assembly was on how to curb smuggling and pipeline vandalism. NNPC boss further said the huge disparity in the pump price of petrol between Nigeria and its neighbors encourages cross-border leakages. In that regard, Kyari says he has sought the support of the National Assembly to curb smuggling. He advised Nigerians to disregard rumors of a planned price hike, saying NNPC does not have the statutory authority to regulate the price of petroleum products. Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele has met with service chiefs and heads of paramilitary agencies on Thursday to work out modalities of enforcing President Muhammadu Buhari's order of stopping further importation of uniforms. Emefiele says this is in conformity with an executive order mandating all ministries, departments and agencies to source their textile needs locally. Emefiele says the central bank has placed a priority on the cotton, textile and garment sector because it has the capacity to transform Nigeria's rural economy and revive the textile and garment industries. He said government's efforts at resuscitating the textile industries would not be actualized if they are not supported through local patronage and other incentives. As regards the primary source of CGT cotton, Emefiele said the CBN has put in place necessary mechanisms to ensure the use of high-yielding varieties that will produce top-quality fabrics and those that can compete in the international market. In what seems like a string of good news, President Muhammadu Buhari has also ordered local production of all Nigerian e-passports. The president has directed the Nigerian Security Printing and Minting Company to solely produce and personalize all Nigerian e-passports and related documentation. This renewed responsibility will end every existing memorandum of understanding and contracts on printing by other institutions and companies. The minting company currently produces the nation's currency notes and coins for the Central Bank of Nigeria, as well as security documents for ministries, departments and agencies of government, banks and other blue-chip companies. It is the largest banknotes and security document specialist printing company in West Africa. Managing Director of the Mint, Abbas Masanawa, says the printing agency has witnessed a rebirth from a moribund organization with heavy losses to a profitable organization. The company grew from a $14.5 million deficit in 2014 to logging a profit of 14.5 billion naira last year. The Mint's turnover also grew from 18 billion naira in 2014 to 60 billion naira last year. To politics, Kogi State governorship election, which comes up in 4 months, is already gathering momentum. Another group of 37 All Progressives Congress governorship aspirants have announced on Thursday they backed the decision of the National Working Committee of the party to approve indirect primary to select its candidate for the November governorship election in their state. The aspirants say they were confident of beating Governor Yaya Bello at the primary because they believe they have the delegates to do so. A group of 20 aspirants have rejected the indirect primary as adopted by APC's National Working Committee. Group spokesperson, Comrade Edime Godwin Amade, says the group of 20 aspirants kicking against the indirect mode of primary was working for the downfall of the party in the state, pointing out that the National Working Committee should not allow the group to pull the wool over their eyes. Power generation companies say Nigeria may not benefit much from the recently signed African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement until the country's power problems are adequately addressed. Electricity firms converged as the Association of Power Generation Companies has sent a congratulatory message to the president on the signing of the agreement. In the message, they reminded the president that without adequate power supply, the benefits of the agreement to Nigeria would be minimal. The APGC said goods and services offered by Nigeria may not be comparatively or competitively priced when compared to other nations with better power supply. At least 500 thugs, members of the notorious Sarasuka, have surrendered their weapons to the police in Bauchi State. The ex-bandits, mostly youths, were received by Governor Bala Mohammed and the Commissioner of Police, Habu Sani, at the command's headquarters. CB Habu said under his watch, the police was able to drastically reduce the soaring spate of Sarasuka robberies, kidnappings and other violent crimes through synergy with other security agencies and volunteer groups. The chairman, Bauchi State Youth for Peace and Unity, Rabiu Shamba, says he was able to mobilize and convince them from the grassroots to surrender to the government. Coming up, African stories. UN says DR Congo's population would significantly increase by 2050. And later, international news. US R&B singer R. Kelly arrested for alleged child pornography, obstruction of justice.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. The African Union is working on a plan that would bring together South Sudanese President Salva Kiir and his former Vice President Riek Machar for direct talks between the two leaders. An AU task force on restoring peace in South Sudan says this is crucial in implementing the revitalized agreement. The task force says it is even more urgent now, 4 months to November the 14th, when a new interim government is supposed to be formed in the country. The task force, known as C5, says face-to-face talks would provide the required leadership, cohesion, inspiration of public confidence and facilitation of reconciliation at all levels in the country. The task force is chaired by South Africa and comprises Algeria, Chad, Nigeria and Rwanda. The United Nations has just wrapped up a two-day regional conference on counter-terrorism at its offices in Nairobi. The aim is to seek ways of eliminating the threat of terrorism from the region. Heads of government and ministers of interior, security and foreign affairs were present at the conference, which also enabled African leaders to share good practices in countering terrorism.
From the Sahel region, where Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Niger and Mauritania are coordinating a security response to a jihadist threat, to West Africa, where Nigeria and Cameroon are battling the Islamic State-affiliated group Boko Haram, to East Africa, where Al-Shabaab continues to pose a significant threat, there appears to be no end in sight to the terror threats facing the continent. Now, a two-day counter-terrorism conference in Nairobi, hosted by the UN, aims to reverse the trend.
I deeply believe that African peace enforcing and counter-terrorism operations must have strong and clear mandates by the UN Security Council, backed by sufficient, predictable and sustainable financial support, namely through assessed contributions.
Kenya's president, whose country has borne the brunt of some of the deadliest terror attacks in recent years, is urging the adoption of a multifaceted approach in fighting terror.
Discussions and solutions should propose multifaceted approaches to combating terrorism, extremism and radicalization that confronts the vice on the battlefield, in places of worship, in marketplaces, in our schools, as well as our homes.
The African Union is calling on member states to deal with the root causes of terror as they address security threats.
This is no ordinary enemy. Countries are now forced to address competing priorities between development and security.
Translating this perception of fear into collective punishment of African youth through discriminatory policies is not the solution, and can even add to their grievances and further radicalize disaffected youth.
A recent United Nations report on world population growth says tremendous increases in population are expected in Africa by 2050, especially in Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Uganda. The DRC is especially singled out as a country that would experience almost a doubling of its population. Reporter Chris Okamringa tells us what the country would need to have in place to handle such a significant population growth.
Bankita Iyeni and his wife are parents of 10 children. They live on the outskirts of Kinshasa with their grandchildren. Extended families are a common feature in the DRC capital, given the high costs of living. But the couple is finding it difficult to provide basic needs for their large family.
Some of my children left their little kids with us. We struggle to take care of them because we don't have a steady income.
I have no job, nothing at all. Our grandchildren need to go to school, but we can't afford to pay their fees.
This family is among many in the DRC that struggle to make ends meet. According to the latest UN estimates, the DRC has a population of 86 million people. That figure is expected to increase significantly over the next 3 decades. The UN has listed the DRC among 9 nations where half of the world's population growth will be concentrated by 2050. A Congolese consultant says the country's large population wouldn't be a problem if it were matched with projects that boost the economy.
Congo really doesn't have really a grave strategic concern with regard to demographic growth. On the contrary, it is an asset, and Congo has got sufficient land, sufficient water and capacity to produce resources to deal with that. And on the contrary, Congo does have surplus to attract, to help Africa. The only problem right now is that the new president, so far, in terms of strategic planning, has not yet pronounced the idea of his game-changing projects.
President Felix Tshisekedi announced a $304 million program during his first 100 days, targeting key sectors that would spur economic growth. But it remains to be seen whether it will transform the country with its rapidly growing population. The UN has urged the DRC and other countries with high fertility levels to find solutions to their growing populations. The DRC's population growth forecast comes weeks after the World Food Programme described the country as the second largest hunger crisis in the world after Yemen. That, coupled with the unrest in the northeast and an Ebola outbreak, presents yet another problem that the country will have to deal with.
When we return, international news. U.S. R&B singer R. Kelly arrested for alleged child pornography. And later, sports. Eaglets to face Hungary, Ecuador, Australia in Group B of Under-17 World Cup.
watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit. We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to world events. Britain and Canada have established a fund to train and provide legal support for journalists in some of the world's hotspots. The two nations hope other countries will also contribute to the Global Media Defense Fund, which will be administered by UNESCO. Britain is donating almost $4 million and Canada kicked in almost $800,000. Britain also announced it was launching a separate $19 million program to combat what many see as a growing crisis for independent media worldwide. The new fund was announced in a keynote address by British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt at the Global Conference for Media Freedom in London. Names of some of the journalists who had been killed were named to narrate the dangers faced by a growing number of journalists each year. Jeremy Hunt said nearly 100 journalists were killed last year, twice the number a decade ago. The harrowing trade dispute between the U.S. and China has created vacuums in world trade. The U.S. is also accusing China of not buying its agricultural products, even as biting sanctions are in place against the country. China has confirmed that trade talks with the Americans will resume based on equality and mutual respect. One Who reports.
Another sign of progress, Chinese Commerce Ministry spokesman Gao Feng says teams from China and the U.S. have maintained communication on the matter. Gao confirmed that the trade talks will resume, but didn't specify when.
They will follow the requirement of the consensus based on equality and mutual respect. China's core concerns must be well solved. We will definitely find solutions through equal dialogue and taking care of each other's reasonable concerns.
Top leaders from China and the U.S. met during the G20 summit in Japan. They agreed to resume the trade talks, which were paused for about 50 days prior to the summit, and the chief negotiators from both sides talked by phone this Tuesday. In line with the loosening tension, America's pressure on Chinese telecom giant Huawei has also eased a little. The U.S. Department of Commerce released a statement. They will issue licenses for American companies' deals with Huawei, where there's no threat to America's national security. But the Huawei remains in the entity list. What's your response?
We noticed that Huawei and other Chinese entities are still on the list. We urge the U.S. to implement its promise and stop the wrongdoing of using national power to suppress Chinese companies.
In late May, Beijing also announced that China will issue an unreliable entity list. Gao says that this entity list is currently in the works and will be issued soon. But he stresses that this list only targets a few overseas companies, organizations, and individuals which do not follow market rules and seriously violate Chinese companies' interests. Most overseas enterprises are advised not to worry. Gao says China hasn't seen a large-scale withdrawal by overseas investors. China will not discriminate nor suppress those investments. China will firmly protect their legitimate rights at home and create a stable, fair, transparent, and predictable business environment for them.
North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un has officially been named head of state after a constitutional amendment granted him a title that previously served a mostly nominal function. A new version of North Korea's constitution was posted to the state-run NARA website, featuring revisions made during the first session of the 14th Supreme People's Assembly in April. Kim Jong-un has already wielded absolute authority in his country since succeeding his late father as supreme leader in 2011. But the latest move essentially formalizes his leading role in diplomatic affairs following more than a year of historic top-level meetings with the leaders of China, South Korea, the United States and Russia. All four countries have sought North Korea's denuclearization in exchange for peace in the region, and since April, their presidents have all had encounters with Kim Jong-un, who was for the first time acting in the same official capacity as they. The latest potential sign he was seeking a more internationally traditional style of rule. The latest parliamentary gathering saw the incumbent Kim Jong-un unanimously re-elected as supreme leader. American singer R. Kelly has been arrested in Chicago Thursday night on 13 new federal charges, including child pornography, enticement of a minor to engage in criminal sexual activity, and obstruction of justice. The singer is in federal custody in Chicago. Kelly was also charged with 11 counts of sexual assault in May. The charges are more serious than the ones that were leveled against him in February. The singer was indicted on 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse in February, and prosecutors have said Kelly sexually abused 4 females, including 3 underage girls. Kelly allegedly had a witness make sex tapes of him having sex with one of the females, a 14-year-old girl. The singer pleaded not guilty to the charges in a June court hearing. Up next, sport. Eaglets to face Hungary, Ecuador, Australia in Group B of Under-17 World Cup. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Nigeria's Golden Eaglets have been drawn in Group B of the 2019 FIFA Under-17 World Cup, scheduled to hold in Brazil in late October. The Eaglets will face Hungary in their opening match. Ecuador and Australia are the others in the group. Former Super Eagles fullback Celestine Babayaro and Brazilian Sonny Anderson were the 2 FIFA legends and tournament veterans present at the draw ceremony, which took place on Thursday at FIFA headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland. Hosts Brazil in Group A with Canada, New Zealand and Angola, while Group C has Haiti, Korea Republic, France and Chile. A World Football Governing Body, FIFA, has launched a new program to enhance child safeguarding standards across its 211 member associations. The FIFA Guardians Toolkit has been put together after consultation with experts in the field from UNICEF and the Council of Europe, as well as campaigners who themselves were abused through their participation in sports as children. Implementing safeguarding measures will also now be obligatory for member associations to get FIFA funding. The development and implementation of the program came after a series of abuse scandals. British football has been rocked by revelations of a slew of historic sexual abuse cases since 2016. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a great weekend.